in the lush Caribbean island of Montserrat. Co-founder and the principal of London Community Gospel Choir, Bazil Meade MBE, is a charismatic and multi-talented vocalist, pianist and leader of Europe's premier vocal assembly and London Community Gospel Choir. In 1960, when Bazil was just 9 years old, he sailed across the transatlantic seas to England. Due to family circumstances, he left home at the age of 15 and was taken under the wing of his musical and spiritual mentor, Reverend Olive Paris. Under her care, his passion for gospel music was nurtured, and his ambition to bring the two fundamental aspects of his life together, his faith and music, was ignited. His desire to inspire and uplift audiences with the gift of gospel music inside and outside the church walls grew, thus birthing the beginnings of the London Community Gospel Choir. Having built up a legion of dedicated fans, the choir regularly perform to audiences all over the world. Many of the greatest musical artists have called upon the services of Bazil and the choir, including Madonna, Sting, Sir Paul McCartney, Brian May, Tina Turner, Diana Ross, Luther Vandross and Kylie Minogue. Bazil can turn his hand to any type of genre, and his choir's versatility have made them the first point of call for soulful vocals for high-profile concerts and recordings. As well as the choir, Bazil runs his own vocal workshops around the world with the Bazil Meade Experience. In 2018, Bazil was awarded an MBE for his services in gospel music. So who best to tell us about gospel music than Bazil Meade MBE? Bazil, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Cyrus. That's quite a roll call there, isn't it not?
It's amazing. What a blessing you've had in this world. That's incredible with your talents. We're going to talk about everything. We're going to go to the very beginning. We're going to go to the very beginning of your childhood very shortly. But you've been given an MBE. How important was that, and what did that mean to you?
It meant a great deal, obviously. But for me, it was not just about me, because it was the work of all of the members of the London Community Gospel Choir, the founder members in particular, who were there at the very beginning. When we had the idea, there was, he is now Bishop John Francis, he is now Bishop Delroy Powell, and there's Lawrence Johnson. We were the four guys or choir leaders who talked up the idea. We would just get together and excite over the possibility of uniting our choirs. And it happened. It came to fruition because I think the energy driving it forward was just tremendous, and it's bound to happen. And that's when the choir was formed. I was the one who literally decided that I was the elder. I was the oldest of all the guys. The others were young bucks just coming up and excited about gospel music. They were Christian. They were loving their faith. They're loving what it did for them and their families, and they just wanted to celebrate the music. So I was the elder person of the foursome, and I took the reins and have been here for over 41 years, been through many adventures.
Wow, it's amazing to hear that as well. Now, can you give us an insight into your childhood? Take us all the way to the very beginning. What was your childhood like? How would you explain it?
It was well, like on a farm, so you could imagine it was very, very connected to nature. I lived, existed, I smelt nature, I touched nature, I swam in nature. It was all natural, and you tend to associate that kind of strong connection with nature with poverty. We didn't have much, but what we did have was nature around us, and we ate healthily because of that. Mainly fruit straight from the trees. Wow. Drank water from the stream. Most of the homes didn't have running water, so they had to go to the local tank, which is the responsibility of the children to go and collect water to bring back, until eventually they ran pipes to the homes in the village. I lived in a village that was circumvented by two rivers on either side. And behind us was a valley and mango trees and Yeah, yeah. Sweet sap trees, there was guava trees, you name it, coconut trees, breadfruit trees everywhere. And so that was the staple diet. It was fresh, nothing canned or tinned. And to eat fish, my brother and I went to the local rivers. One particular river that had a lot of what Jamaicans call them janga, but Montreal would call them river fish. They were black shrimp, and there were river lobsters as well. So we catch those, my brother. We were well known in our village for doing that. We didn't have a problem, and whenever we went to the sea fishing with our dad, he caught conger eels.
Wow.
And when I told my choir members about it, they said, "Yeah, how could you eat that? But snake, they call it." I said, "No, it wasn't." So they said, "You eat any and everything." I said, "Yes." I lived off of nature, and whatever my dad caught from the sea, we ate.
Wow. I mean, it sounds
And
incredible. What an adventure you were living as children as well. Not only were you doing adventurous activities, but also eating such fresh fruits and vegetables and everything else. But it just shows how times have changed, Basil, as well. You look at the children today, and it's literally another world we're living in. Children today, they're not interested in going out and being with nature or eating fruits and vegetables and everything else. How things have changed.
Well, they eat a lot of chicken, but they all believe that chicken comes from Sainsbury's and Tesco's. They don't realize it comes from an egg. Then it is developed on a farm somewhere, which is fed and watered and bred and farmed for their pleasure. And they get terrified when they hear about the process, not knowing the animal has to be killed in order for them to enjoy its flesh. I lived on a farm where that was normal. We would rear a pig. Pork was the normal Christmas meat, not turkey. That I learned about when I came to UK. Wow. So it was rearing a pig. Everybody in the village and the island was known for you rear a pig, and comes close to Christmas, that pig was slaughtered and provided meat into January and February and some occasions. So and I saw all that happening. So I was accustomed to that. I was accustomed to seeing the process of, slaughtering an animal and providing meat for the family.
Amazing. Now, you moved over to the UK from the Caribbean when you were just 9 years old. Can you give our viewers an insight what it was like being a 9-year-old, moving to a totally different country, fitting into society? Give our viewers an insight. What was that like for you?
It was a challenge. It was a scary experience. A 9-year-old, soon to be 10, arriving on a different planet, basically. At that point, I've said this in interviews so very frequently, I'd never seen a white person close up at that age. It was my first experience. And there were, of course, hundreds of them everywhere. They were on the boat, they were on the ship, which I traveled practically on my own for 2 or 3 weeks, I think it took us to arrive here in the UK. My dad asked a couple of guys who were coming from my village to keep an eye on me. That was it. Arriving at Southampton to see trains for my very first time, seeing it blowing its steam and hearing the noises around and smelling the place, and freezing in February, I arrived. And I was still dressed as if I was in Montserrat. You can imagine my little bones were really rattling all over the place. I was cold. I didn't have a coat. And eventually had to be shown into the lost property office, where my mother eventually found me when she arrived. She was late. Eventually found me and had a coat with her. Gave me something so I can warm up my body. It was a crazy experience for me, absolutely. And then arriving in East London, where I first lived, it was another experience.
So you were, while you were traveling, were you separated? You traveled separately from your mother?
Yeah, my mother was already here. She's the one who sent for me, as was normal back then. After the war, the British government sent down representatives to the Caribbean island, Montserrat being one, to inviting people to come to the UK to help to rebuild the motherland. Because we're still a British colony, even now, we're still a British island. And my mother responded to that, as many other islanders. And she, probably in 1955, she came up. And she worked hard where she was able to find work. My mother could not read or write. And it's a testimony just how resilient and tough these
Wow.
people were. They called them the Windrush generation. They did amazing things to uh, assimilate and to get into the community here. It was tough because people were reluctant to rent them to any rooms. A lot of racism, it was blatant. I remember the shops on Lower Clapton High Road with the signs, no blacks, no Irish, no dogs,
Mm.
not necessarily in that order, but those three were the undesirables. And I belonged to one of that group. And so it was shattering to see that. Um, you walked into some of the shops and you could sense the hostility from the people. I remember all of that. People would shout abusive, racist remarks as I walked the street to and from school, where I eventually started. And so, yeah, it was difficult. It was very, really difficult.
You had some difficult times in your teenage years as well, because you left school and you ran away from home age 15 years old after you had domestic abuse as well from your stepfather. Can you give our viewers an insight into what happened there?
Hmm. Well, I arrived in the UK to my mother having married a gentleman who was my stepfather, obviously. They had already given birth to their first child, who is my baby sister, Rosalind. She's no longer with us. Immediately, I began to look after her because she was born in February, literally just before I arrived. So, changing nappies, feeding her, doing the motherly things, following mom's instructions. I also started cooking meals. That I was preparing the meal for the family before she came home from work because I got home from school. I'm a dapper hand at preparing a meal. I learned from my dad in Montserrat because I lived with my dad and my brother, and he cooked better than any master chef.
Wow.
And so we learned all of those skills. By the time I arrived there, I was already able to cook. So I started that. Um, the time with my stepfather became very difficult as I grew up and started developing, looking a bit manly, and listening to the way he treated mom and hearing the noises, the arguments from the bedroom at nights, and realizing that this man was treating my mother really bad. And on one of these occasions, I was kept awake and went to bed with anger. I mean, deep anger in my gut and my mind and my heart. And I decided I'm going to talk to this man in the morning. So when I saw him the next day, I said, I don't like how you're treating my mother. You're abusing her and you're making her life hell and etc. and etc. I couldn't. None of my school friends could come to my home. If they ever came to look for me, I had to meet them at the front door. They could not come into the house. Just some of the rules that this man had laid down, and it was just an unpleasant place to be. At 15, I just felt at that time, no, I can't put up with this. And particularly, I felt I am the other man in the house, and to not say anything to him as he was abusing my mother just felt like I was not being the person I should be. So I confronted him. And fortunately, I was quite strong at that time. I was doing a lot of sport and I ate good, I think. So I was quite built. I was always interested in bodybuilding. So I had a bit of build on me. And I approached him and he decided I was rude, which I was rude. I was quite aggressive and told him determinedly that he cannot do this again. He pushed me aside and went somewhere. He came back with a hammer.
Wow.
And he lifted the hammer and hit me. I grabbed him, his hand, stopping, scrapping, smashing my skull, and it was close to the toilet upstairs. We ended up in this small toilet, wrestling and rolling about in the toilet, and I managed to push him away. And I went down the stairs, and I left the house. I went to stay the day out of the house. I went on to Leicester Square, Piccadilly area, where I saw a guy who was advertising for people who would like to try their hand at selling books to American service people in Germany. Mm-hmm. I listened, and there were a few other young guys like me paying attention on their journey as well. We all had our separate journey. And it looks like we took the bait. I went back home and got few bits of money I had, what it was savings I had, I think it was. I packed a bag and I told my mom I'm leaving.
Wow.
I went back down to Leicester Square, Piccadilly the following day, and at the time that this guy said we should turn up, and I was there with three other guys. I jumped in this Jaguar and drove to Germany over a day and a half or something. Yeah, and that didn't work out too good. Fortunately, I had enough sense after a couple of weeks, running out of money, not speaking the language, no way to live because we slept on floors while we were there. Nothing this guy promised us in Leicester Square was true.
Wow. I mean, it's just incredible to hear your story of what you've gone through, but things started to turn around because eventually you were taking under the wing of a musical and spiritual mentor, Reverend Olive Paris as well, who introduced you to Jesus. Tell us, how did that happen and how did that transform your life?
Well, I knew Olive before I started on that adventure. I went to the local church, the New Testament Church of God in Cricketfield Road, Clapton, East London. She was like the youth pastor there and had already started on her evangelistic trips to the branches of the New Testament Church. And she also ran a Tuesday evening youth club, a youth meeting. And I would go to that. So I knew her, and she was talking to me because she realized I was having some challenges in my life as a young man. She said, "You look like you're always ready to fight. You seem to be always angry," which I was. Because I was living with that stress in my life. And she was talking to me. She took interest in me. She must have seen something in me that no one else saw. The story is long. There's so much detail. I have to bring it to put it in a box, basically.
Sure.
So after, fortunately, I had this relationship and not just as a church minister, she had a genuine care and interest in me. I think I sensed that. So when I decided that I couldn't stay in Germany anymore, I woke up one morning and stole away. I bought a train ticket with the remaining funds that I had and rode the train through France back to the port, Calais or one of those places, and ended up back in Dover where I landed. And of course I was relieved, but at that time, I didn't want to, I had no intention of going back home, so I rang her. And she was living in the church, in a building, a home at the time that had about 4 or 5 bedrooms. And she said, "Well, look, if you don't want to go back home, if you want to come here and stay, there are 4 bedrooms here. You can stay in one until you decide what you want to do."
Wow.
That's what I did. And that is when my life changed.
How did it change? What happened then? Because it was a tragic life that you were living up until then. How did your life transform from there?
Well, she showed me how, taught me or showed me my first. She prayed over my hands first. She asked God to give me the gift.
Did you have any relationship with God or anything before then?
I went to church. Let's say that. But a commitment, a serious commitment, I think that came afterwards, after all of this that I've been through. That's when I realized, and I think I recognized that God must have had his hand in my life. He took me through some of those situations, and I was learning things about me, learning things about determination, and I suppose a bit of common sense. Because I think at times maybe the anger that I had in my life probably, marred some of the more positive areas of my personality. And Olive helped me to relax. First, she prayed for me. I left school at 15, so I had very basic English, maths, and the rest of it. I things like algebra, I can't even pronounce it now. I mean, things that the children are learning now is like a foreign language. So I was very basic, and so she realized that. So she started setting me English lessons. She taught me how to do crossword puzzles, which are my favorite pastime up to now. It's my way of remembering her and celebrating her. And things that helped me to develop my vocabulary. She was an amazing, creative woman. She taught herself to use computers when they first came out. Bought one, taught herself how to use it. Got the book and read it and just went through it and taught herself to use it. She also created her own printing press where she would record the things that happened in her revival meetings that she was running up and down the UK. I started, go ahead.
Is that where the love of music began for you? Your relationship with your Jesus Christ grew as well. But more importantly, is that what planted the seeds for music for you?
She's the one that did it. She's the one who did it. She prayed on me, asking God to give me the gift of music. She taught me to play in C sharp, my very first chord. The evening, I played for her. She started singing hymns, which were very much a part of her ministry before she preached. She always sang. And so by the time I left her home that evening, this was literally by the time we'd finished, I was accompanying her, using those 3-4 chords. And that's how I started my first public meeting 3 weeks later, playing in one of her meetings. And eventually she left the New Testament, started her own church, her own ministry, and we grew. And there were about 14, 15 young people in the church. She came to me one day and said, Basil, we need to have a singing choir in the church. So she was a collector of gospel albums. She had a handful of gospel vinyl albums in her hands. And she said, listen to these artists, learn the songs and teach them. Teach them to the young people so that they can begin to sing gospel music in the services. Wow. That was it. That was my introduction to singing and playing gospel music.
What is it?
I learned from.
What is it about music and the power of music, of how it can change people's lives? It can lift people up when they're down. It can draw people close to Jesus Christ. What does music mean to you, and how can this music be used to evangelize as well?
It is one of the most what do you call it? I think we don't recognize the power of music. For healing physically, mentally, spiritually. It's just it's a great vibe. I've seen people change who've come into the London Community Gospel Choir very, very lacking in confidence, so into themselves. But after a few months, celebrating and singing, learning to sing and recognizing, realizing they do have a contribution musically. They might not be able to preach, they might not be able to do many other things, but they realize there's this gift, that's ability of music that God has placed in their life. They can be part of this family of other human beings who are learning the same truth about themselves. And collectively, they became the London Community Gospel Choir, and realized when we went out on stage, it was impacting people's lives, Black, white, Asian, whatever culture or color. It was impacting lives in a way that they had no idea. They had the ability to be effective in this way. It's tremendous. I've seen people's lives change, people's personalities change as a result.
Amazing how you're using music, the power of music, to lift people up, draw them closer to Jesus Christ and change their lives. Also, you're using it as an opportunity of getting to perform with some of these well-known artists as well. Gospel music with people that are maybe even in the secular industry. You're planting those seeds into them as well. Give us an insight into that.
It is a tremendous thing. Of course, it was hard for many of the Christian community to appreciate what we were doing, because we were not looking to sing in church services. In fact, it wasn't us singing with the artists. They're the one who wanted us to sing with them. Exactly. Because we enhanced what they did. That's why they came to me. And that's the fact. That's the truth. They came to me because they wanted what they do to have what we've described here. Wow. The sort of upliftment, the celebration of human beings, the celebration of a faith which they don't understand, but they want to be part of it. They want to be part of what they do.
Are there any examples that you can give our viewers today of people who have actually shared, that well-known artists who have shared the experience that you've given them?
We performed at the very first AIDS Awareness Day in Wembley Stadium. Now, don't you remember? You're probably too young then, not being born then. Yeah. But we performed in that. You had George Michael, you had Elton John, Freddie Mercury was still with us at the time. Wow. And they the promoters got in touch with my office. They had asked another choir if they would do it. I think the choir were a bit challenged, and they decided they didn't want to do it. But I always felt that God's purpose for my life, this choir's life, was not a ministry to the church. It was ministry to the young church.
Wow.
And in order to do that, we had to be out there where they are. They will not come to the church services.
Amen.
And when I received that invitation, we deliberated. I deliberated. And I looked at it and thought, well, I'm sure we will get criticized for it. But you know what? Following the example of our leader, Jesus Christ himself, we need to not feel that we have to do things to please the church family. We need to do things to please God.
Amen to that.
He encouraged us to get out into the world and preach the gospel.
Can you give our viewers any examples, Bazil, before we finish the show, of any obstacles or challenges that you've experienced in your own personal lives, and how did you overcome that? Just to give a message of hope to our viewers today.
Let me share this with you. During our preparation to walk on stage, we kept our green room door open. We were having our devotion as we always do. And while doing that, a team of rock guys walked into the room, leather and everything else. And they said, well, can we join you? We heard you're beautiful singer. We'd like to be part of what you're doing. We said, well, we pray always before we go on stage. Right. They came in, they broke the link, and they joined us and they bowed their heads. And when they finished, they said, oh my God, you have taught us so much. We didn't realize this is what you guys do before you go on stage. You blessed us. You made us feel that we now appreciate this gift to play music that we have. We will always have a devotion before we walk out on stage.
Wow.
But you've shown us the way today. This actually happened in Wembley.
Oh, amazing. God is using you. God is using you so much, and it's amazing what you're doing. Just for any of our viewers right now who may be lost, they're in a crossroads in their own personal lives, what final message of hope can we give to our viewers today, Bazil?
Life is extremely difficult, challenging in so many ways. People are being oppressed financially, mentally, emotionally, physically, and it makes it more difficult to do the things that we want to do for God. But you know, the most important thing that we can do is have our devotional time with God. Our salvation, I've always stuck with this one. It's a very personal thing. You know, and you need to devote your time to that. Commit to His purpose in your life, not what others say to you, but what you believe God has given for you to do. That is your purpose, and that will guide you through, navigate you through all the challenges that you will face in your life. That is my testimony, and that's why I'm still here, loving what God has given me to do.
Thank you so much. That's a real life testimony there in connecting with Jesus Christ. He is the center of it all. I want to say a huge thank you to Bazil Meade MBE, the founder of the London Community Gospel Choir. Thank you so much for joining us on Revelation TV, and God bless you, brother.
My pleasure, Cyrus.